Horizon hell, unhelpful helplines, and post office robbery. These are the interesting times. Hello everyone, my name's Matt Johnston and welcome to The Interesting Times, a comedy show that looks at the state of UK politics. A lot of the news over the last few weeks has been related to the post office scandal. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to have a look at that, just a mere quarter of a century after the whole thing started. And I'll hold my hands up and admit, if it wasn't hitting the headlines and getting an ITV drama, I probably wouldn't have been dealing with this, said the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
What do you think it says that it's taken an ITV drama to get your government to refocus on the issue of the scandal of the post office? And don't you think after all this time, it would now be a good idea to just quash all the remaining convictions?
So, first thing to say is this is an absolutely appalling miscarriage of justice. Right? Many of you in this room would have watched the drama, and congratulations to ITV for doing a superb job on it. Now, these things obviously started a very long time ago, and it's right that they're looked at properly. And the stories are appalling. People were treated absolutely appallingly. That's wrong, and we should do everything we can to make it right.
If you'll remember, the original question was about his government focusing.
I would say that,
here we go.
Over the last few years, my predecessors started the process of doing that, had the inquiry. Actually, as Chancellor, I approved the compensation schemes for the first time, which are now in the process of being paid out. The money is there. I approved it as Chancellor. There are 3 different compensation schemes, and we will do everything we can to make this right for all the people affected, because it's simply wrong what happened. They shouldn't have been treated like this, and we should do everything we can to make it right for them. Right.
Oh, yeah. Clap the crap. All right, let's start at the beginning. Right at the beginning. In 1516, Henry VIII established a Master of the Post. You know what? I don't really think we've got time for that. Let's skip forward a few centuries. And they come through, and they say, chop, right on the head, put the crown on the head, and this, and away we go. So, 1997, and New Labour swept to power, and they decided to keep the post office under public ownership, government owned. But they wanted to introduce all these new fancy things that a post office could do. So they brought in something called the Postal Services Act 2000 and changed the name to Insignia, which is Greek for which twat came up with that. Horizon was brought in 1998, over a quarter of a century ago. Except it gets worse. An early Horizon system was actually brought in 1995 and rolled out to 300 post offices. So, as easy as it is to blame New Labour for a lot of things, this system was initially brought in by John Major's government. That early system saw 2 occasions of shortfalls in the accounting, which was brought to the attention of ICL, the company responsible for the software, and a subsidiary of Fujitsu. Under this initial rollout, 2 sub-postmasters were accused of fraud. The system itself appeared to be having all sorts of buggy, not an IT wizard, problems. But ICL Pathway Limited managed to persuade New Labour to go ahead with it. Now, if you're thinking ICL Pathway, why does that name sound familiar? Yes, they are the ones behind the project to computerise social security benefits payments through the post office. It raises all sorts of questions such as, why the hell did we give ICL any work? Well, it's to do with the creation of ICL in the 60s by a Labour government. And it was meant to be the British rival to IBM. Just one problem. They weren't IBM. They were crap. But as the government had initially spent money on them, it wanted to recoup that money by giving them lots of government contracts. A practice that is still carried out to this day.
Just lastly, why are you still using the Horizon system? Are you simply using them because no one else can do it? Or are you just failing to actually innovate and look at new suppliers?
But it does what it's meant to do in terms of the job that it does today.
It clearly doesn't. ICL was so bad no one wanted to work with them. So the government asked Fujitsu, which was a company that came with a good reputation, to come on board in the early 80s. Leading to them becoming the sole shareholder in the late 90s. But the problem is that ICL became an infection which made the British branch of Fujitsu crap. Anyway, in 1999, the software was rolled out, and in 2000 and 2001 had been rolled out to some 13,000 branches. Problems were spotted fairly quickly and brought to the attention of the Verizon helpline, which wasn't very helpful at all, and simply told people that there was nothing wrong with the system and they would have to come up with a shortfall themselves. This led to many of them remortgaging their houses, maxing out credit on whatever they could, and when the shortfalls continued and the people involved either ran out of money or refused to pay, the post office would send their own prosecution team. Alan Bates was the first to point out these problems in 2000 and simply refused to accept liability, and so was sacked by the post office. In 2009, he had managed to get hold of details of other postmasters, some 7 initially, and set up the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance. Now, this does sound like the world's crappiest superhero team, but let's be honest, the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance would still be better than anything put out by the MCU in the last 3 years. Or indeed, in the next 3 years. So, the meetings of the JSA took place in the sounds ruder than it actually is, Fenny Compton. They, along with some MPs, put pressure on the post office to look into the Horizon system, and independent forensics accountant working for Second Sight looked into the system and found it to be deeply flawed. This was rejected by the post office, and this dragged on until in 2017, having got some financial backers to be able to do so, Alan Bates and approximately 555 sub-postmasters took the post office to the High Court and won. Unfortunately, after paying legal costs and their backers, they were left with about £20,000 each, which is a lot to spend on a 2-week holiday or a new car, but a rather small amount when you're talking about people losing livelihoods, houses, reputation, and in some cases, freedom, and some of them were sent to jail. And of course, the mental health aspects, which saw 4 people commit suicide as a direct result of all this. Or, as it was described in the House of Lords,
the leadership of the Post Office got it wrong, got it very badly wrong, and as a consequence of those actions, people have experienced unfortunate situations.
The problem the sub-postmasters faced wasn't really the Horizon system. Yes, it was crap, but anyone that works or has worked in an office will be able to point to some useless system full of more bugs than Nigel Farage was a few months ago, or fingers crossed still is. The problem was they were told that they were the only ones having problems, and they were being pursued vindictively by the post office through the courts. The post office had no end of money to throw at lawyers if they didn't pay up, and some simply accepted liability rather than go to jail. Now, the post office, certainly at the time, was considered an organisation morally beyond reproach. Thankfully, thanks to this man's stubbornness and organisational ability, the truth is starting to come out. And yes, of course, the ITV drama helped, and it included a rather surprising cameo.
Unfortunately, those emails that were provided were for the wrong year.
That seems to me an amazing error.
Yes, ex-Chancellor and tax size stepper extraordinaire Nadeem Zahawi played himself in a select committee he was part of in 2015 that grilled the CEO of Post Office Limited, Paul Venables. And he was the only person in the TV series asking to be paid in cash, I imagine. So, short recap. Post Office put shit IT system in sub-postmasters post office and doesn't recognise that it's shit and takes entirely innocent sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses to court. One politician not too keen on reprising his role was Ed Davey, who was the postal minister when the scandal broke.
And I think Ed Davey is failing to comprehend right now the scale of public anger at this.
Ed now blames the post office for apparently not telling him the truth, which shows that he was either incompetent or gullible.
The leader of the Liberal Democrats was the minister in charge of the post office. In charge of the post office. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that the leader of the Lib Dem should take his own advice and start by clearing his desk, clear his diary and clear off?
We are being mistreated here. We want to meet you. And he gives a phone call to someone in the civil service to fill your boots. And is there anything going on here? No. What are you doing this Christmas? You going skiing at Cloisters?
And you know what? I'm sorry, but I have no sympathy for Ed Davey, or indeed any of the other 2010 Liberal Democrats that went into a coalition with the Tories. Of course they were going to try and pin all their faults onto you. That's what they do. You can't complain about being bitten if you get into bed with snakes. The same Tories that are calling out Ed Davey are remarkably quiet about Theresa May, who 7 years after Ed left the post, made Paula a CBE for, services to the post office, despite warnings about the scandal. So, where are we now? Well, there is an inquiry happening, and running alongside that, the Business and Trade Select Committee took the opportunity to grill the current CEO of the Post Office, Nick Reed. The committee had some of the finest political minds Westminster had to offer. And Jonathan Gullis.
Apologise, I might be one of the only people in the country who's yet to actually watch the ITV drama, not through any deliberate choice, but with having 2 young children, I'm stuck between Paw Patrol and many other shows.
Captain Caveman wasn't the only one to have missed out on the drama. Immigration Minister Michael Tomlinson appeared with Kay Burley on Sky to show he didn't really have time for box sets. He was more of a sporty kind of guy.
Probably don't have enough time to watch box sets, and I'm not sure I could even tell you the last box set that I watched. But I do enjoy watching sport, and if you want to ask me about cricket or sport, then please do.
Who's your football team?
Not that sport.
I don't have a specific football team now.
OK, it's good to see.
Wimborne Town Football Club.
Oh, well remembered.
OK, what was their last result?
I couldn't tell you that. The last result that I was there was a very exciting. Lots of goals were scored and it was a 1-1 draw.
Goals are plenty. 1-1, which is 3 in total, I believe. Our captain, Nobby Stifflon, scored the winner and was hoisted aloft by the crowd as they all chanted huzzah. And everyone retired to their homesteads, saluted the king and went to bed dreaming of a past Britain, a better Britain. And you don't get matched reports like that from Labour. Now, unfortunately, despite all this talk of speedy justice, so far all that has happened is Paula Venables has, reluctantly, handed back her CBE. Extraordinary to think that they offered Alan Bates an OBE, which he turned down. Of course he did. Why would he want to be part of the same club as a person responsible for all this? Imagine that at the next charity fundraiser. Hello, Alan. Lovely to meet you. This is Paula. I believe you know each other. Alan, really, I don't think there's any need for that kind of language. And so far, 53 postmasters have died waiting for the slow cogs of justice to start turning. And unfortunately, some others will undoubtedly follow suit. And it's becoming painfully obvious the post office may be under new management, but it's still delivering the same old junk mail.
Do you think the post office attempted to mislead Parliament and the public?
I can't specifically comment on.
How regularly is it that the Post Office does not track money within its company?
Well, clearly that's something that we do regularly now. I mean, we are running a business today, and clearly what...
Was it not a business back before? Was it not business back then?
I can't comment on the specifics of what was happening.
From your point of view, when do you think Post Office staff first knew that remote access to Horizon terminals was possible?
I couldn't give you an exact date on that.
Why can you not answer that question? It is fundamental to this case.
Yeah, can I just say, I've asked 3 or 4 questions. I haven't had one answer.
And for those of the Windrush generation and their relatives, this should give the sub-postmasters pause for thought.
Well, Downing Street says it has just accepted the resignation of its Home Secretary.
Rudd told lawmakers this week she wasn't aware that people were being deported to meet quotas. But a leaked document published by the Guardian newspaper appeared to suggest otherwise.
Yes, 6 years ago, the then Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, resigned. Remember when people used to do that? Over her misleading the House of Commons on illegally deporting immigrants from the UK. In April 2019, the Windrush Compensation Scheme was set up with £500 million allocated to those affected by this. And 5 years after it was set up and 6 years after the problem forced ministers into resigning, only £75 million from the £500 million has been given from the compensation scheme. And during this time, 40 people have died still being owed money. Then there's Grenfell.
The latest figures that we have from the Department for Levelling Up Houses and Communities show that about 41% of buildings with unsafe cladding that have been identified have started or completed remedial works, which of course means that the majority have not.
This was 7 years ago. You can't blame Putin's illegal war in Ukraine on that. And what about the blood transfusion scandal from the 70s and 80s, where thousands of people were infected with contaminated blood, giving them AIDS and hepatitis? It's taken to December 2023 to get a compensation scheme even going for them. And even that was almost stopped by Rishi Sunak's government using a free line whip. And in all these cases, payouts are delayed until there's no one left to compensate. Now, I am aware that if this was John Oliver or another show with a big budget and their own law department, I'd be advising my millions of viewers to crash some website or some other anarchic response. But for the sub-postmasters, there's not really a lot I can suggest. There is, after all, an inquiry still happening. For Windrush, Grenfell and the blood transfusion inquiries that have happened, and people are still seeking justice and some sort of closure, depressingly, I can't suggest anything. Except, and just to be clear, this may not work, but I figure it has to be worth a go, right? We have a general election coming up in approximately 10 months' time, and it looks a done deal. The question doesn't seem to be if Labour will win, but how many will they win by? So, if something were to look like it might eat into that lead, deny them an outright majority, then they are going to sit and take note. And we have become obsessed over the last few years with polls. So, the next time you see somebody in your local shopping centre with a clipboard or an email asking you for your political opinion, provided it's not spam, of course, dive right in and tell them you're going to vote Green. The Green Party have been pretty vocal on delivering justice for these people, which is why it's a smart move to say you're going to back them, even if you have no intention voting Green, because it's all about perception. And perception, that's important.
Evidence shows that there is a perception of bias. Well, there is a perception. Impartiality is about perception of... And
that's it. No time to talk about the fact that, yes, there is indeed an election this year. So, obviously, people are out campaigning and doing interviews. Bad interviews. How bad? Ed Davey being advised by Prince Andrew with notes from Michelle Mone bad. That's how bad. In fact, they're all Tories, but let's be honest, you kind of knew that anyway, right? So, I've got a top 5. In at number 5, North Warwickshire MP Craig Tracy, seen here trying to follow the photographer's advice of just look natural, who went on to LBC with Ian Dell and was asked one simple question.
Can you name me one thing that works better now than it did 14 years ago in this country?
Well, I think we need to remember the backdrop of where we
understand
are.
that.
But I think
simple question.
Well, I think these. There's been an awful lot of challenges, and I think we're pushing, we're working extremely hard to try and get off the backdrop of what was a 1 in 100 year event. We've recruited 20,000 more police officers. So we've got the police, but we've got more people on the streets, and also, but we're bringing them in, and we're.
Come on, Craig, do your homework. When someone asks what's better after 14 years of Tories, it's very straightforward: food banks, scurvy, and racism. At number 4, MP for Bexhill and Battle and Minister for Transport, in particular car crashes like this one, Hugh Not So Merriman.
Before I let you go, is the BBC biased?
But let me give you an example. I know that you were searching for them yesterday. I was listening to the news quiz, which is on Radio 4 at 6:30 on Friday. I was driving from my constituency office to the home. For 10 minutes, all I heard, and it wasn't satirical, it was just diatribe against Conservatives, not the government.
Give me examples.
I have found examples in there. So that was again, I don't want to be personal.
Now, I know you've had 24 hours to think about it, so you must have got specific examples of when BBC News has been biased. Give me one.
So when I worked at the Department for Work and Pensions and I was working on universal credit, there was an individual there who would report on it, Neil Buchanan, who I always felt gave one side of the story.
OK, News Quiz is a comedy show. The actual example you've given is over a decade old. And the person you're referring to, I believe, is Michael Buchanan. Neil Buchanan was a kids' TV presenter responsible for a show called Art Attack on ITV some 20 years ago. But apart from that, I think you've aced it, honestly. So at number 3, same question to Dame Andrea Jenkins, or to give her official title, Baroness Brainfart, seen here showing her class.
Thank you. Clearly they're biased. I mean, look at how they keep Gary Lineker on there, despite the things that he says. Look at the coverage of Israel and the terrorist group Hamas. They wouldn't even call them out as being a terrorist group. There is bias. Quite the act to get Gary Lineker and Hamas into the same single point you're trying to make.
Bit of a theme this, as in at number 2, Lucy Fraser, the worst person to hold the post of Cultural Secretary. Yes, I know who else held it, but trust me, you got to snip it earlier. Watch the rest of the interview.
They're being heard.
Do you think the BBC is biased?
The evidence shows that there is a perception of bias. Been biased, yes.
In relation to what?
Well, this report isn't about incidents, but we have seen recently that it's had to apologise for its own reporting, for example, in relation to the attack in the hospital in Israel, so in Gaza.
What's the difference between mistake and bias, surely?
Well, there is a perception amongst the public that the BBC is biased.
It's bias. Where's the evidence?
The evidence of bias is what audiences believe is the content of the BBC and
But that's
how
perception. That's not evidence. That's perception.
That is evidence. That is evidence. Impartiality is about perception of the things that are being broadcast by the BBC. And the evidence in relation to that perception is that...
perception and evidence are different things.
Now you're probably thinking, that's not fair, Matt. The Tories are the one in power. It's easy to criticise when you're in opposition. Yeah, you think so? In at number 1, and a non-mover, certainly in the polls, it's the Tory hopeless for London Mayor Susan Hall, seen here realising that that wasn't just a fart.
Oh, I probably should know what nurses earn and teachers
All right,
earn.
it's £36,000. So, how are you going to get more?
Right, so there is a problem with recruitment. I would suggest it's because police are being so bad-mouthed in London.
Would you alter bus fares?
You're going back to finance
Well,
again.
what is the bus fare? How much do you pay to get on a bus currently?
I don't use them. I use trains all the time.
You don't know what a bus fare is?
No.
Susan Hall, you don't know who owns Hammersmith Bridge, you don't know what a police officer makes, and you don't know the bus fare.
She then failed to answer what colour London black taxis were, how many levels on a London double-decker bus, and what city London Bridge was in, before blaming Sadiq Khan for stealing her mobile phone, wallet and jewellery. But thankfully, a kind person dropped them off in a bedroom side cabinet. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed these videos, and indeed are enjoying these videos, then do like, share, subscribe and comment, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.